You know, one of the other things too that might be addressed here is
Hey, it's Mary. So they're both on Mike and I.
Alexis Tsipras, the Greek prime minister, said, "I hope we don't have to face more people." Talking about the potential for the Trump presidency.
Sure.
Let's see if he's still of the same mind or if we need to change that.
Boy, this sun is just horrible. No, not at all. Me as well. Just that. All right, you got it. Yeah. Well, I think yeah, well, because I'll have to probably go up a little higher and try to get that. Yeah. Tell him that. Did you hear that? What's up, buddy? But Kelly, if he's over here, stands off to the side. Well, we can have one time to try to get him. So I'll go up the whole way and try to smoke his head. That's for sure. Okay. All right, so you're open now? Or no? Oh, okay. Which probably will happen, and then they'll do the announce while he's walking. Okay. Once I can, I will be here. You find out if I put the whole way around with this camera, I can't get in the Is it on mine? Yeah, I mean, I've tried to. Does that lens flare out? Okay. Say again? I'm fired. I see why you wanted Maine now. Cheater. Matter of fact, let's switch. Flip a coin. Me too.
Oh.
Look, there is no question that President Trump needs Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to pass his budget in order to take that one step closer to tax reform. Now, I just spoke with a senior source close to Senator Dan Paul, who has been a bit skeptical of this budget, and says that the senator really be on board with the budget.
You got it? All right, I'll center it up a little bit right there.
So clearly, with now our Senate underway, they need to get that done if they hope to get any type of meaningful tax reform done by the end of the year. Now, that said, last night, following that controversial press conference here at the White House yesterday, I spoke with a senior source,
right,
who said that they were paying attention to what the president said on his way into that meeting with the majority leader, and they feel that the president still does understand that he needs that type of relationship with the Democratic coalition, as they call it, they're saying that they are still very much ambitious in order to get some type of meaningful tax cuts by the end of the year. Whether or not that's not really practical or not, but in addition to that, we're also anticipating that the president will announce a
Good.
in place that will
August. Just 2 days. Back on the plane.
Well, I think we're going to see a bit of everything in the U.S. in the town hall discussing that particularly as well as some economic side, particularly whether or not
I remember very well.
but, look, this administration also made a call out in Korea. They asked North Korea to definitely on the brink of nuclear war. As the administration is trying to pressure North Korea, not just from the United States, but also by using economic sanctions with Russia and China. How they are looking to slow down the rate of North Korea's
You're not open up yet, right?
So huge where they've done at least
well, publicly, it's a new problem.
he actually
Yep.
How do you
No, the Scotch rides are so tight. My back is like half crooked. I should have flipped the coin. You're right. I'm sorry. This will reflect. Yeah, I think he'll be all right. Yeah.
Yeah, he is. He just got inducted. This summer. He was verified. He's got great with the Air Force Chief. Every single one of these guys wants to have.
You see any movement in the local bend? See any movement in the local bend? I said, do you see any movement in the open?
One or two Democratic senators would love to have one or two Democratic senators with their structure. I can tell you that they're not
much more than it's more relative. When you're sitting in the Eastern Mediterranean on the doorstep of all the disorder that arises on this run has been down here. One circle is Libya, another circle is Syria, Eastern Med, and the third circle is and so I feel very proud of her.
Two minutes.
David and I were good friends. We worked together. I was the gas and
This is an NBC News Special Report. Here's Lester Holt.
Good day, everyone. We're coming on the air as President Trump is about to take questions from reporters in the Rose Garden. The president meeting today with the Prime Minister of Greece. He is expected to be asked about a range of topics on a busy news day, including the firestorm over his false claim yesterday that his predecessors, including President Obama, did not make personal calls to families of fallen service members. The president could also face questions on the withdrawal under fire of his nominee as drug czar. A new swipe last night from Senator John McCain, also a major development in the fight against ISIS, and a stock market milestone here. So a busy day. Let's start off as we wait for the president and the prime minister. Let's go to Hallie Jackson right now. Hallie, you have been following the fallout from this false claim, as we noted, about other presidents reaching out to families of the fallen. The president today injecting his chief of staff's son now into this conversation. Can you explain?
Right, on day two, essentially, of the story that you're talking about, Lester, as we stand here in the Rose Garden for day two. This one, obviously, a more expected press conference than the surprise news gathering yesterday with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. But you're right about the president's comments talking about his chief of staff's son, essentially, saying that General Kelly was not called by President Obama. A White House official essentially saying that was the case, although it's worth noting that General Kelly a year later did attend a breakfast with President Obama and the First Lady. Lester?
All right, Hallie Jackson, thank you very much. The President and the Prime Minister Tsipras now being brought into the Rose Garden. You'll note the Prime Minister not wearing a tie. Don't read anything into it. He typically does not wear ties. Here's the President.
Thank you very much. I just want to make an initial comment that the stock market just hit an all-time record high. It broke for the first time ever 23,000. So we're very happy about that. I hope that Greece is going to be doing the same thing very soon. I think they will. But I'm honored to welcome Prime Minister Tsipras of Greece, and he's a special man who's done a very special job. We're grateful to the Prime Minister and to his entire delegation for visiting us today at the White House. Greece is a cradle of Western civilization, so true, of democracy, literature, philosophy, science, and so much else. America looks on that glorious heritage with wonder and with awe. You do indeed have a tremendous heritage, Mr. Prime Minister. Perhaps for this reason, America's friendship with the Greek people has been long and enduring. Thomas Jefferson wrote at the dawn of the modern Greek state that no people sympathize more with Greek patriots, and none offer more sincere and ardent prayers to heaven for their success than the American people. Jefferson's words are true to this day. Mr. Prime Minister, I'm proud to report that this past March we celebrated Greek Independence Day right here at the White House, and that was great. America and Greece draw on this common history and heritage and on our people's abiding commitment to freedom and sovereignty. In working together on great challenges and opportunities now before us, there are tremendous opportunities before us in so many different ways. The Prime Minister and I have just concluded a very productive discussion on the cooperation between our two countries, including on matters of defense, energy, commerce, and trade. I want to thank the Prime Minister and the Greek people for serving as gracious hosts to our U.S. naval forces at Suda Bay. I also commend Greece for being one of the few NATO countries currently spending at least 2% of GDP on defense. My administration has also informed Congress of a potential sale to Greece to upgrade its F-16 aircraft. This agreement to strengthen the Hellenic Air Force is worth up to $2.4 billion and would generate thousands of American jobs. We also are making great strides in our economic cooperation. The American people stand with the Greek people as they recover from the economic crisis that recently afflicted their nation. I've encouraged the Prime Minister in his continued implementation of reform and reform programs, that I have totally reaffirmed our support for a responsible debt relief plan. A strong and flourishing Greece provides immense opportunity for American trade, investment, and job creation. I thank the Prime Minister, his predecessors, and the Greek people for their efforts to return stability and prosperity to Greece. On energy, we appreciate Greek contributions to European energy security through its support of the Trans-Adriatic Pipeline, the Greece-Bulgaria interconnector, and liquefied natural gas facilities that are capable of transporting diverse sources of energy to Europe, including potential liquefied natural gas exports from the United States, of which that particular route and business is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, as you know. These initiatives make both our people safer and create good jobs for our hardworking citizens. Finally, I'm also very proud that the United States will be the honored country at next year's International Fair in Greece. This historic business and trade exhibition will showcase American technology, enterprise, and innovation on the world stage. We look very much forward to sending a high-level delegation to attend this wonderful event. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you again for being here today and for your partnership in addressing critical issues facing our countries. I look forward to having many productive discussions with you and to having a very close and warm cooperation on a wide range of shared objectives. We will build upon our foundation of shared history and shared values to pursue a future of security, prosperity, and peace for both your nation and ours. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much. Thank you.
Trump in his opening remarks. Now the Prime Minister Tsipras of Greece will make his opening remarks. We'll come back to the podium in a moment when they take questions both from U.S. media and Greek media there in a moment. But as he makes his opening statement, let me go to our political director and moderator of Meet the Press, Chuck Todd. Chuck, so many stories moving on, so many points around the White House. We mentioned this flap over whether the president's predecessors honored the families of those lost in wars overseas. Also, the John McCain remarks in a speech, his veiled swipe at the president. The president today suggesting that he can only hold his tongue so long on this. Do these fall in the category of self-inflicted wounds?
You know, I think they do. Look, we actually noted this today in First Read on our website and our political update this morning, Lester, which is simply imagine where the president would be. Like, take away the political debates about the future of healthcare, the political debate about North Korea, about Iran. Those are falling. There are true ideological divides on this issue. It's all the stuff he takes personally, and he personalizes it. The idea of calling fallen service members. That, again, his initial reaction was about making it about himself, making it the personal rather than about the presidency. And he's picked all of these, whether these little feuds, and then he does these little feuds which turn into bigger feuds because people are human when they react. It's human nature, and it creates these cycles, and it gets him bogged down. I mean, you could make an argument that one of the things holding him back more than anything else are these personal feuds that he can't help but either start or finish. He always claims he's just responding, but some of them he can start on his own. The NFL is something he decided to wade into, for instance. If you took all of those things away, Lester, do I think we'd have a different health care plan? No. But would we be in a different place in this town where you'd get more potentially done? The answer to that is yes.
And then the question, of course, as this plays out, he obviously is holding his tongue responding to John McCain to an extent. Is that some suggestion that he understands the downside?
I think on Senator McCain, given the fact that he is truly fighting for his life, this is his prognosis is very bad. His long-term prognosis is very bad. So I think the president, that's the dangers he's hinting at there. But you know, it's sad that people are looking at John McCain's statement and speech last night as a personal attack on the president. Again, I wish people would actually go back and just listen to the argument he's making. That's all. This is about a larger argument about which direction the Republican Party and the country should go to when it comes to international relations, unilateralism, multilateralism. That's what John McCain was talking about, and the president turned it into a personal attack on himself. That's how he viewed it. And again, that's what gets him into trouble. His base loves it. Lester, they love the pugilistic nature of him. And they're like cheering him on, right on. But that's 37%. He doesn't budge. He goes maybe a point or two up, point or two down. But that's his core. It's the other 60% that aren't listening to him more and more, and that's the problem he's got.
And we've been talking about this John McCain speech. Let's play the key point that seems to be what's drawing all the attention. Here it is.
To fear the world we have organized and led the 3/4 of a century, to abandon the ideals we have advanced around the globe, to refuse the obligations of international leadership and our duty to remain the last best hope of Earth for the sake of some half-baked, spurious nationalism cooked up by people who would rather find scapegoats than solve problems. Is as unpatriotic as an attachment to any other tired dogma of the past that Americans consigned to the ash heap of history.
Senator John McCain, who was being honored at an event in Philadelphia last night. Let me bring in our chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell. Andrea, you were on the air earlier today. What is the reaction to the president based on that speech and also this flap over families of the fallen?
There's been outrage in both parties. I talked to Leon Panetta, of course, who is defense secretary and CIA director. in the Obama administration, but a lot of people very uncomfortable about this. Lindsey Graham, who just played golf twice with the president in the last few days, also criticizing the whole issue of the Gold Star families, that the president should not have been talking about that. Bill Kristol last night on MSNBC saying that he was talking about his own pain and how difficult it was for him to comfort these families. It's not about him, they were saying. It should be about the suffering of these families who have made the ultimate sacrifice, Lester.
All right, and just wonder, if you're just joining us, want to let folks know where we are. The president and the prime minister of Greece have met this morning. They're holding a joint press availability right now. President Trump made his remarks. We're watching their Prime Minister Tsipras make his remarks. In a moment, we'll take you back to the podium as questions, typically 2 questions from the U.S. media and 2 questions to the foreign media. But as we know, President Trump will often call on others. He did have an impromptu news conference yesterday, which elicited a lot of the conversation we're having right now, as he went beyond what the plan was, which was to show that all is well between himself and Mitch McConnell. And on that point, Chuck, if you're still with us, you know, that almost got overshadowed, that moment. But are they truly okay now?
Not at all. I mean, that was for Washington. That was to paper over things. But the fact of the matter is, you have the president's former chief political strategist in that White House, Steve Bannon, doing everything he can to make Mitch McConnell's life miserable as Senate Republican leader. You have different members of the Trump administration now openly going after the Senate for not getting things done. You have the House Speaker going after the Senate. So I think this was a show of unity for the cameras, but that's all it was.
Yeah, there's a lot to get done, as we've noted, tax reform among them. Kristen Welker is also on the White House lawn right now. Kristen, is the administration changing its timeline as when it wants to get or expects to get some of these big things done?
Well, publicly, Lester, they're saying that they want to get tax reform done by the end of the year. Privately, I spoke with a senior administration official who said the reality is that might not be realistic. They have a critical test coming up this week, a vote on the budget. Senator Rand Paul already indicating he's not sure he's going to go for that, Lester.
All right, President now taking questions. Let's get you back to the Rose Garden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good to see you out in the Rose Garden again. We
Nice
seem to do this on occasion.
It's a nice place.
I have a question for the Prime Minister in a moment, if I could. But first, sir, you said just a short time ago that Obamacare is virtually dead. Your plans for Graham Cassidy have not been able to get off the ground in the Senate. There's no idea whether or not it will in early 2018. You've been picking around the edges to some degree with the executive orders, some of which critics say are helping to destroy Obamacare. So I'm wondering, at this point, what is your health care plan, sir?
Well, if you look at insurance companies and you take a good, strong look and at the numbers, you'll see since the formation of Obamacare, they're up 400%, 450%, 250%, 300%. They've made a fortune, the insurance companies. So when I knocked out the hundreds of millions of dollars a month being paid back to the insurance companies by politicians, I must tell you, that wanted me to continue to pay this, I said, I'm not going to do it. This is money that goes to the insurance companies to line their pockets, to raise up their stock prices, and they've had a record run. They've had an incredible run, and it's not appropriate. Obamacare is a disaster. It's virtually dead. As far as I'm concerned, it really is dead, and I predicted that a long time ago. It's a concept that doesn't work, and we are very close. We feel we have the votes, and as soon as we're finished with taxes, John, we really feel we have the votes to get block grants into the states where the states can much better manage this money and much better take care of the people rather than the federal government. The state block grants will do massive block grants into the various states so that the states can run the program. So we feel we have the votes. We're going to be doing that after the taxes. In the meantime, we're involved with a budget, and then after the budget, hopefully that gets approved, and after the budget, assuming we have the support of all the Republicans, because we'll have no support from the Democrats, or almost no support, because they've really become just obstructionists. They have no good policies, and frankly, they're not good politicians, but they're very good obstructionists, and that's what they do well, obstruct. The number of nominees that I have approved by the Democrats are about half of what President Obama had, And when you look at that, and you can look at judicial appointments, look how slow that's going. I'll have 145 ultimately, which is a tremendous number. We'll have 17 Court of Appeals appointments, but they're not getting approved. They're being slow-walked by Schumer and the group of Democrats that really it's really disgraceful. Even people that they know they're going to approve, they take it right out to the end. They use every single minute. And I think it's a very disgraceful situation. But Obamacare is everything but dead. The people aren't going to take it. They're not going to take it. Alaska, they had over a 200% increase. In Arizona, they were 116%, and I hear going up even higher. And the people aren't going to take that any longer. So I think we're in great shape. I think we have the votes, and we'll be doing that right after the largest tax cuts in the history of our country are approved, hopefully sometime in the very near future.
So is Graham Cassidy still the plan, sir?
Yeah, essentially that would be the plan, yes, block grants.
And Mr. Prime Minister, with respect to the president, in March of 2016, you said of the potential for a Donald Trump presidency, quote, "I hope we will not face this evil." And I'm wondering if after spending time with the president, you have changed your mind or if you're of the same mind.
I wish I knew that before my speech.
Διαπίστωσα από την συνάντηση που είχαμε με τον Πρόεδρο ότι η προσέγγιση του στα πράγματα και ο τρόπος με τον οποίο αντιμετωπίζει την πολιτική ορισμένες φορές μπορεί να μοιάζει διαβολικός, αλλά γίνεται για καλό. Οι Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες είναι μια εξαιρετικά σημαντική δύναμη.
The U.S. is a very strong power, and their ability to intervene for good are very, very important. I want to confirm that the meeting that we had was very productive. Not a moment did I feel that I threatened at any time. I saw that there is a very fertile outlook here. In order to set aside any differences we may have, to find the common ground which is really important for the relationship between our two peoples that are traditional and historical, and for our common objectives. We need common values. We have common values, excuse me. Don't forget that the value of democracy and freedom was born in Greece. And it's one of the basic values that traverses American culture and American tradition. The president today of the U.S. continues this tradition, and I think our collaboration will be very substantial, and I'm very optimistic after the meeting that we had today.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. I might just add that a number of countries were a little bit nervous at the beginning, and I have very good relationships with the leaders of virtually every country I've dealt with. But the reason they were concerned was because I will not allow our country, the United States of America, to be taken advantage of by so many other countries all over the world. If you look at our trade deficits, massive trade deficits with virtually every country. You look at our jobs moving out to certain countries, and the companies are leaving and they're firing the people, and the product is made elsewhere and then it's sold back into the United States. I'm not going to be allowing that. So I can understand how certain countries and the leaders of certain countries may feel. But we're just not going to allow the United States to be taken advantage of by other countries anymore. And there's nothing we can do about that. Thank you. Okay, you have a question.
With the Greek Public TV. Mr. Prime Minister, how do you plan to attract long-term foreign direct investments in Greece? And if you can elaborate, please, on the steps that Greece is making to tackle bureaucracy and overtaxation in order to ensure investors around the world that Greece is ready for business. And Mr. President, if I may, why would you encourage the U.S. companies to invest in Greece, and how can the U.S. support the Greek efforts to fully turn the page, attract investments, and manage its debt? Thank you.
First of all, this is one thing is to intervene legislatively to attract investment, and it's different to work on a daily basis to implement these intentions in a stable environment.
we opted to conflict with the basic illnesses of Greek public administration and to create a friendly environment for foreign investment, because this is our investment, our priority today. Investment, it means jobs, jobs means less unemployment, and it means return of young people that have left Greece, educated Greeks that have left Greece to go to other countries, to come back to Greece. So what did we do? We passed a law in Parliament that provides a stable tax environment, a fixed tax rate for 12 years for investments of high value. We simplified the procedures to provide licenses to investments. We introduced the fast-track process for strategic investments. And we also made significant change to hit and combat bureaucracy through digitization of procedures, administrative procedures in public administration, and our vision is to have a digital public administration, but that we really want to make it practice. I personally have created a task force in the Prime Minister's office for investments, so we can see whether laws are being implemented, whether there is effectiveness, and we are sending out a strong signal of political will to promote these projects. The President asked me earlier what is happening with the Hellenikon, with the old airport, where years ago he himself, as a businessman in the past, was interested in it, and he saw himself the weaknesses and the illnesses of Greek public administration. I informed him it's moving on, it's moving along, and very soon we will see this area being formed to a very, very large real estate project in Greece, which will be, we're hoping that will be an attraction for other investments from abroad. I'd like to also say that Greece, for the first time, from the last country, is the first country in absorbing European funds, investment capital from European structural funds. So we find ourselves at a turning point, a point where investments can provide the ability to exit finally the crisis. And the message I want to pass on to U.S. investments is that Greece is not just a tourist attraction, the best baby in the world, but it's also an investment attraction, an investment destination as well.
I can say that we have a great confidence in Greece. I think it's a land of tremendous potential. I know many people are looking to invest in Greece. A lot of the problems are behind it. They've had some very good leadership. They've really done they've made a lot of difficult decisions. We are helping, as you know, with a massive renovation of their Air Force and also of airplanes generally going to Greece. They're looking at buying additional planes from Boeing, and we are helping. We're very much involved with Greece and with helping Greece get back on its feet. We have a tremendous Greek population in this country, people whose heritage is Greece, and we love that country, special country, one of the most beautiful countries in the world, and so I think it's got great potential, and we are helping it along. Okay. Jennifer, you want to go?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Sure.
I have a question for both of you, but let me start with you, Mr. President. Let me give you a quick question about the Federal Reserve. Do you have any other candidates that you're looking at other than Powell, Yellen, the five that have already been named? Are you looking at anyone besides those folks?
I would say within those five, you'll probably get the answer, and I'll be making the decision over the next fairly short period of time.
Can you say who your favorite is at this point?
Honestly, I like them all.
Okay.
I do. I have a great respect for all of them, but I'll make a decision over the next very short period of time.
Can I ask you a quick Obamacare question as well, even though John Roberts asked one as well?
Sure.
Apparently, Lamar Alexander has said he's made a deal with Senator Patty Murray to stabilize Obamacare. Has the White House been involved in those negotiations, and will you support that deal?
Yes, we have been involved, and this is a short-term deal because we think ultimately block grants going to the states is going to be the answer. That's a very good solution. We think it's going to not only save money, but give people much better health care with a very, very much smaller premium spike, and you look at what's gone on with that. Also much lower deductible so they can use it. Lamar has been working very, very hard with the Democratic, his colleagues on the other side, and Patty Murray is one of them in particular. And they're coming up, and they're fairly close to a short-term solution. The solution will be for about a year or 2 years, and it'll get us over this intermediate hump because we have, as you probably know, we have either have the votes or we're very close to having the votes, and we will get the votes for having really the potential of having great health care in our country. So they are indeed working, but it is a short-term solution so that we don't have this very dangerous little period, including dangerous period for insurance companies, by the way. For a period of 1 year, 2 years, we will have a very good solution, but we're going to have a great solution ultimately for health care, okay? And they are working together, and I know very much what they're doing, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Prime Minister, on Turkey, do you still regard Turkey as a democracy, and should Turkey remain a member of NATO?
Πρέπει να σας πω.
I have to say that despite our concerns regarding Turkey, despite the concerns that are also based on the daily Turkish intervention in the region, nevertheless, we continue to support the Turkish course towards Europe. We respect it as a regional power, and we believe that it must stay oriented toward the European perspective, stably oriented to its collaboration with the West, and stably oriented towards NATO. We do believe that the European outlook perspective of Turkey can also be a lever of pressure so that we can have those reforms toward the democratization of the domestic of the country. So my answer to your question is relatively easy. Yes, we do believe that Turkey must remain within NATO and in its European course. But on the other side, we have to ensure, and we must make it clear to this ally of ours and to its government, that the road to Europe and the stay and the collaboration with the West carries with it certain conditions and certain responsibilities. And one of the most necessary conditions is to respect international law, to collaborate, and not promote tension with ally countries such as Greece. This is our basic direction. And I do believe I had the opportunity to go in detail on this matter with President Trump, to explaining the need for the fulfillment of these conditions so that there are clear messages also toward the Turkish administration.
Okay, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Prime Minister, how do you...
And the event coming to an end shortly here, this meeting earlier today between the President and the Prime Minister of Greece, and now taking a few questions. The President not taking any questions on some of the more hot-button issues. He did talk a little bit about his faith that a health care bill will get done, suggesting that would come after tax reform, which in itself is a bit of a steep hill on some levels to climb. But the President, again, still he hope that he will have a replacement for Obamacare, perhaps in the not too distant future, I think is the way he put it. Let's quickly go to Hallie Jackson there. Let's go quick to Chuck Todd. Chuck, the President did note, I don't know if he was referring to the Prime Minister of Greece, but he took a swipe at countries that, in his view, are not giving the U.S. a fair break. Did you pick up on that?
I did a little bit, but look, let's underscore the news here. The President essentially endorsed the compromise on health care. It's a big deal. The President is trying to dress it down. He's trying not to say what is happening, which is Obamacare is going to be saved. He's going to sign a bill into law that saves it for, as he said, another year or two. But the point is, past the 2018 elections. That's a huge, big deal, not just on policy, but politically as well. Now, I think the next step here is, Does the president's HHS department, do they fully implement? Do they fully implement enrollment? Do they try to keep the law not just functioning, but flourishing? Do they use this? That's going to be sort of the next step here. But that's a big deal. He signed off on it pretty as close as you can come, at least rhetorically, on this. Not a small deal. Let's see if we can get through the House. That is another hurdle that does sit in front of this Obamacare compromise.
All right, Chuck Todd, thanks very much. As we noted, a lot of things going on at the White House and on Capitol Hill regarding all this. We'll have full coverage throughout the day on MSNBC and NBCnews.com. I'll be back tonight with NBC Nightly News. Until then, I'm Lester Holt in New York. Have a good day, everyone.
Μιας πολυδιάστατης εξωτερικής πολιτικής, αλλά με βασικό στόχο να αναβαθμίσουμε το ρόλο της Ελλάδας ως μιας χώρας πυλώνα ασφάλειας και σταθερότητας σε μια ασταθή και αποσταθεροποιημένη περιοχή. Το κάναμε καταρχάς εμβαθύνοντας τη συνεργασία μας με δύο σημαντικούς εταίρους στην περιοχή, το Ισραήλ και την Αίγυπτο. Με τριμερείς και πολυμερείς συνεργασίες. Η Ελλάδα, η Κύπρος μαζί με το Ισραήλ, η Ελλάδα, η Κύπρος μαζί με την Αίγυπτο, αλλά και με άλλες σημαντικές χώρες στην περιοχή, όπως η Ορδανία, ο Λίβανος. Στόχος μας είναι μέσα από αυτές τις πολυμερείς συνεργασίες να διασφαλίσουμε τη συνεργασία, τη σταθερότητα, την ειρήνη, τη συνανάπτυξη σε αυτή την περιοχή. Βεβαίως η Ελλάδα διαδραματίζει εδώ και αρκετά χρόνια έναν, όπως πραγματικά τονίστηκε και πριν, διαδραματίζει τον ρόλο ενός αξιόπιστου συμμάχου των ΗΠΑ. Ταυτόχρονα όμως έχει και μια μοναδική ιδιαιτερότητα. Μπορεί να συνομιλεί η Ελλάδα με τον αραβικό κόσμο, με άλλες χώρες στην Ανατολή, άρα δεν είναι απλά ένα κράτος μέλος του ΝΑΤΟ, αλλά ένας χρήσιμος σύμμαχος για τις ΗΠΑ. Σε ό,τι αφορά την Κρήτη και την βάση της Σούδας, είναι σε όλους μας γνωστό ότι έχει ιδιαίτερη γεωστρατηγική σημασία, την οποία την αξιολογήσαμε από κοινού και πιστεύω ότι ήδη γίνεται μια πολύ σημαντική δουλειά εκεί, η οποία μπορεί και πρέπει να αναβαθμιστεί.
Well, I want to thank everybody. The Prime Minister came out here and he said, "This is so beautiful." I said, "This is the Rose Garden." And I think even the media likes the Rose Garden. That's hard to believe, but even the media likes it. Mr. Prime Minister, it's been a great honor having you, and we look forward to many, many years of friendship, working together, and keep up the good work. Thank you very much.